Hello cozy gamers and welcome back to the Cozy Gaming Club where we talk about all the cozy games. Today we're taking a look at Spirittea, which is sort of a cross between Stardew Valley and Spirited Away. I've been so excited for this game to release because it's got such a unique premise, which is why I thought I'd do this 30-day video to show it off. Before we dive into that though, I wanted to say a big thank you to No More Robots for kindly gifting me a key to take an early look at the game. As with all good life sims, we start by designing our character. Sadly, there weren't a lot of options here. There were 2 face styles and then 2 hairstyles, long and short, in a few different colours, as well as a bald option. When it comes to clothes, there were a few more options, but still not a huge amount of choices. So I'm quickly moving into my first day, or evening, because after a really long bus ride, I finally arrived in my little town long after the sun has set. After getting off the bus, I meet Miko, who is kindly waiting for me despite the late hour. She takes me on a little tour of the town before dropping me off at my new house, which looks a lot nicer than some of the houses we usually get in life sims. There's already some furniture, and a kitchen, and there surprisingly aren't any holes in the floor or walls. There's even a nice bath that I take a dip in before heading to bed for the night. The next morning, I awake to a knock on my door and another granny called Amelia shows up. She'd just popped by to introduce herself, share some food with me, and also give me a map of the town, which was huge. She was also kind enough to help me find a desk to do my writing at because it turns out that we're an author. I headed straight over to her shop to see if she had anything suitable, and fortunately she did. This was when I met Moby, who was kind enough to help me carry my new desk home, and then I got to choose where to place it in my house. But just as I did, the rice cake that Amelia had given me earlier started floating across the room, before being eaten right in front of our eyes. Moby was rightfully shook up and started telling me about some of the other strange goings-on in town, including his own issues where his bath keeps growing strange plants around it. Suddenly, there's a knock on our door and Young enters. He runs a temple in town and also wanted to come over and introduce himself. He's also brought his trusted colleague Jan along with him and suggests that we go with her to meet the other townsfolk. Everyone's favourite first quest in a live sim. But then it turns out that Jan is a dog and everything gets so much better. Similar to Potion Permit, you can tell Jan who you want to find and Jan will lead you straight to them. So we immediately set out to meet the townsfolk. Our first stop was at the school to meet Bruce, the headmaster, as well as Kim, Yumi, Toby, and Clarence, who are all teachers at the school. I also met Ling, the school doctor, and saw Miko again, who cleans the school. We were just getting started, but honestly, I was so impressed by how diverse some of the characters were already. Our next stop was the apartment block where I met Lee, but sadly no one else was home. After that, we headed into town and met Faye, who's the local carpenter, and we met Gail at the beach. Back into town, we ticked Sora, Julian, Jillian, and Quill off our list. And we also met Radish as well, who is another one of the cute animals in town. In the coffee shop, we met Sujin and Tara, and then we headed to the convenience store to meet Kenzo. With just 4 people to go, it was back to the general store to meet Song and Momo. As we headed away from town, we bumped into Tifa, looking after the crops, and then met our final citizen, Maru. After that, Young came to collect Jan and take her home for the night, and I decided to turn in too. The next day, it was raining, and I headed straight to meet Tifa to collect the tea that she'd offered me the day before. It was cold and rainy, so of course I headed straight home to brew it, and I loved that it was called Spirittea, which it turns out is a very apt name. After drinking my tea, I was able to see a visitor in my home that hadn't been there before. Wonyan was a floating cat spirit, and he had some serious issues that he needed my help solving. The town was being haunted by lost spirits, and Wonyan wanted my help to find them and remind them who they are. First, he wanted to show me something though, so we needed to head up into the mountains. I hadn't been there yet, so I wasn't really sure what to expect, but it definitely wasn't the grand bathhouse that greeted me with a giant tree growing out of it. One suggested that we reopen the bathhouse to help the spirits and also to make a little money on the side as well. But to do that, we'd have to find the spirit who Wonyan had entrusted with the key, They were going to be somewhere that had a lot of sweets, so my first stop was a convenience store, of course, and we quickly struck gold. At the back of the store, two pesky spirits were sampling the wares. When we confronted them, though, they turned into a little car and sped away. The chase was on, and after running after them for a while, we finally caught them and revealed their true identities. Now that they could remember who they were, they turned over the key for the bathhouse and promised to stop by once we had it up and running again. Which is what we immediately set out to do. The place was a state, though. There was dust and cobwebs everywhere, but before we could get started, it was time for a quick tutorial. Wanyan showed us how to cut logs and start the boiler that warmed the bathhouse. Then it was time to wash the towels and hang them up to dry. With a stack of fresh towels ready to go, we opened up the bathhouse for the first time and our customers started arriving. Here we got more info about spirits and how certain spirits don't like sitting next to other spirits. Every spirit belongs to a season of the year, and it's important to make sure they don't sit next to spirits from an opposite season. Finally, it was time to actually open the bathhouse, and I started by placing all the spirits into cold water, because I hadn't realised my fire had gone out while I'd been chatting to Wanyan. Rookie mistake. But they soon started brightening up as the water got warmer, and before long they were all grinning happily. Apart from the two that I placed next to each other accidentally. Then, with all the towels out, it was time to start cleaning up. I grabbed a brush and set to work cleaning up all the dust and cobwebs that were hanging around. And this was how I spent the rest of my day, cleaning the bathhouse and looking after my spirit customers. By the end of the day, it was looking a lot cleaner, and we'd made a small amount of money to help us get started. As I went to bed that night, I discovered that I could decide how long I wanted to sleep for, and this was going to be very useful later on in the game. But it was just a fun little quirk at this point. The next morning, Wanyan introduced me to my notebook, which let me take notes about strange things I'd noticed around town to help me keep track of potential spirits. Our first spirit was very likely hiding in Moby's bathroom, so we headed straight to the apartment block to investigate. His bath was indeed overrun with vines, and there we found a spirit lounging away once we activated our spirit vision. After a lot of arguing between Wanyan and the spirit, they finally realised who they were and regained their true form. After a terrifying scene where they talked directly to us, the player, they agreed to come to the bathhouse, and we'd successfully solved our first spirit detective case. But our new spirit was quite a lot bigger than our other spirits, so if we wanted to house them all, we'd need to speak to Faye about upgrading the bathhouse. Everything was a little bit more expensive than we could afford right now though, so our only choice was to return to the bathhouse and reopen it to make some extra moulags. Our new spirit was a lot bigger than the other spirits we'd been dealing with so far, so we would definitely need that extra space soon. While we were working, suddenly something happened and everything started to spin. It turned out that by running the bathhouse and helping the spirits, we were raising our spirituality. This meant we'd be able to see even more spirits around town. After running around for 9 hours and raising 2,000 total moulags, it was time to wrap up the day. After speaking to some townsfolk, which is when we got our next spirit hint. Young wasn't ringing the temple bell anymore. As we set out on day 5, Wanyan stops us to take a look at the town notice board. The local townsfolk are putting up notices about things that are going on around town, which makes it the perfect place to gather info about new pesky spirits. After another long day at the bathhouse, which was now looking spotless, we wrapped up to go and catch Sujin's boat menace. We were just on our way to her place when Wanyan called for our attention again. He wanted me to interact with Faye's table to unlock a new bath to the bathhouse. Faye caught us though, and although she was a little concerned about me putting money into a property I didn't own, she was happy to do it. So I purchased a small bath. Then it was time to quickly continue to Sujin's boat to capture the spirit covering it in graffiti. The spirit didn't want to come easy though. They ran away when we confronted them, and after another chase scene, we found ourselves back at the mountaintop. This spirit was only following orders from another spirit, who Wanyan ended up whacking on the head a few times with his coin. Borzo and Dolmori soon remembered their true selves and once again promised to come to the bathhouse, so it was another job well done. We still had another quest to investigate though, the mysterious lack of ringing bells. With only a couple of hours to go until 8 PM, we sprinted to the temple to work out what was going on. But when we investigated, I couldn't see anything amiss. I was a little confused about where I'd gone wrong, so I headed home for the night. But first, I stopped by Lee's cart for a strange drinking game that reminded me a little of the Shake the Bottle game on Mario Party 8. I can't really say I understood what I was supposed to be doing, but we took it in turns and I eventually lost the fee. On day 6, another notice appeared on the notice board. This time from Bruce, who needed a durable, shatterproof picture frame. Strange. I made my way to the bathhouse to open it for the day, only to discover that it was unavailable, which is when I realised my first mistake. Buying the upgrade for the bathhouse on Friday meant that I wasn't able to use it for the entire weekend. With that painful lesson learned, I headed back down to town to find something to do and immediately bumped into Ling, who provided me with a little more information about Bruce's troubles. He'd been a bit down recently, and she'd noticed broken glass on the floor of his house the other day. With nothing else to do, I decided it was time to investigate. My first stop was at the school to try and find Bruce and chat to him about what was going on. He explained that while he didn't believe in ghosts, every time he came home his parents' shrine had been messed with, and he felt like it was his parents letting him know that they were disappointed in him. It was actually quite emotional reading through his story, but sadly we couldn't do anything about his issue until the new week started. I also couldn't buy a fishing rod or a bug net because the shop wasn't open, so I spent the rest of my day talking to all of the townsfolk to build up my relationship with them. I also took Ling to the karaoke bar and experienced my second minigame, which was a lot harder than I was expecting. With nothing else to do that day, I ended up taking a nap to skip time until 7 PM so that I could head back to the temple and investigate the bell. This time, I saw a strange spirit hiding beneath the bell, and after a bit of back and forth between Wanyan and the spirit, a cute chicken revealed itself. They just wanted a cozy place to nest, and this bell had been perfect. If we kicked them out, they'd have nowhere to go, so we offered them a new home in the bathhouse. With that spirit sorted too, I made my way to the shop, which was finally open. There I picked up some extra bath towels so we could cater to more spirits, and then I headed home for the night. I woke up bright and early on day 7 and started the day by speaking to Young, who was pleased to share that the temple bell was now fixed. I also met Maru and Jan again and realised I could just talk to them continuously to raise their heart levels. So of course I maxed out my friendship with both of them, and they were kind enough to give me a garden gnome and a tennis ball. I spoke to a few other villagers, but like the day before, there wasn't really much for me to do. I went back to the karaoke bar again, this time with Lee, and I also maxed out my friendship with Radish, who rewarded me with a dead bird. And eventually I decided to end my day early and headed to bed at just 1 PM. After an incredible 20 hours of sleep, I woke up at 8 AM on day 8 and ran straight to Bruce's house to investigate what was going on with his shrine. When we arrived, everything was completely normal, and there were no spirits in sight, so we settled down to wait. At 9 AM, a spirit appeared out of the fridge, stalked across the room, and threw the photo frame on the floor. It was very annoyed at Bruce's parents, who had built their house on top of its shrine. Now they had no home and were taking out on the photo of Bruce's parents. To appease the spirit, we'd need to find it a new home, which was going to be a lot easier said than done. What followed was 4 hours of running around the town trying to find a new shrine for the spirit. And eventually we stumbled across a rundown shrine that would be perfect, if I could fix it up. Fortunately, Song had just started stocking a carpenter's repair kit that would be perfect for doing up the shrine. The only issue was that I had no money after not working for the whole weekend. The bathhouse was still closed until the next day too, so instead I started working on the other shrines I discovered. Sort of like the bundles in Stardew Valley, these shrines ask you to collect certain items to donate. A few of them were easy, like the hot chocolate and espresso that I ticked off today, but others like dragonfish were probably going to be a lot harder to find. With that, I wrapped up day 8 and moved straight on to day 9. The bathhouse was finally open again, and I ran straight there to start making some money. With all of the new spirits I'd unlocked, it was time to start experimenting to see who liked who, and with the new bath, it was a lot easier to keep the spirits who didn't like each other apart. I spent the entire day at the bathhouse, and by the end of it, I'd made over 3,000 moulags. Not bad at all. That was more than enough for the repair kit, so it was straight to the shop to buy it. I also checked the notice board on the way and saw that there was another quest there. Someone was stealing from Julian's restaurant. But that was a task for another day. After purchasing the toolbox, I ran straight to the shrine to fix it and ended up working through the night to patch it up. By 10 a.m. the next morning, the shrine was in full working order, and I made my way back to Bruce's house to let the spirit know that. Fortunately, they hadn't left yet, and we were able to tell them the good news. They wanted to see their new home right away, and they loved it. So much so that it reminded them of who they were. They suggested that we come back later today, so I split out to fill my time until then. First up, I went to the shop and bought an upgraded backpack and one of each of the tools. Then I decided to go fishing with Sujin. The fishing minigame was a lot of fun once I got the hang of it, and I was impressed by how quickly your friendship levels go up when you're doing activities with people. After Sujin needed to leave, I remembered that Julian was having an issue with a food thief, so I headed over to his restaurant to chat to him. He wasn't really sure what was going on, just that food was disappearing right before his eyes. Activating my spirit vision quickly showed the source of the problem, though. A sneaky spirit who was stealing all the food. To be honest, they did think they were paying for it, but seashells and lead just aren't currency anymore. The spirit agreed to leave Julian's restaurant alone if we cooked its favourite recipe one more time. The only issue was that Julian had lent his family's recipe to Tifa, so it was off to find her. Unfortunately, when we found her, she confessed that the recipe had been stolen. She'd followed the trailer footprints to the beach, but hadn't been able to find it. I made my way straight over there, suspecting there may be another rogue spirit around, but it just turned out to be a little hermit crab who'd made off with the recipe. This was the easiest part of the quest though, because next we had to cook the recipe, and we didn't have any of the necessary ingredients or the second recipe we need first. Sadly, none of the shops had the ingredients in stock that day either, so it was time to head to bed and wait for the next day. My plan for day 11 was to try and make as much money as possible so that I could buy the ingredients when they came into the shop stock. So I opened the bathhouse bright and early at 7 a.m. I finally cleaned up all the dirt from the bathhouse, that I could clean anyway, and my spirituality leveled up a couple more times as well. By 9 p.m. we'd raised another 3,000 moulags, and just as we were leaving the bathhouse to head home, Wanyan had an idea. If I became close enough friends with some of the townsfolk, I could maybe get them to help out around the bathhouse with some of the chores like washing up. This was such a cool idea, and I love that it's a feature in the game. I also experienced my first period of exhaustion, which isn't surprising considering I'd been working in the bathhouse for over 12 hours. I stopped by Bruce's house on the way home to discover that he was much happier now his problem had been resolved. Then I went to see some of the other townsfolk as well, except I suddenly passed out from exhaustion. The next day, my plan to befriend the townsfolk to employ them at the bathhouse commenced, with going bug catching with Kenzo. Except almost immediately after inviting him to join me, he had to leave to go to work. So I decided to just run around and chat to everyone. When I was on my way to the temple, I had a strange occurrence where an empty text box randomly popped up. At first, I thought it was just a bug, but then it happened again, and this time Wanyan commented on it. Looks like this was another mystery to unravel. Given that it seems to happen at random moments though, I decided to continue with my day, which is when I came across our new spirit friend in their shrine. They decided that they wanted to set up a shop, which was perfect for me. Finally somewhere to sell all the fish I'd just been stockpiling in my fridge. After a slow morning of chatting to everyone, I decided to put in another shift at the bathhouse to earn a bit more money towards another bathhouse upgrade. I managed to earn another 2,000 moulags and level up my spirituality again, which nicely wrapped up that day. My mission to befriend the townsfolk continued the next day, as I spent my morning speaking to everyone. I also took Yumi to the karaoke bar for some early morning belters. I was starting to get the hang of the rhythm game and managed to achieve my first S-tier score, which boosted my friendship with Yumi a lot. She gifted me a vase with flowers to celebrate us becoming closer friends and then left for the day. So I moved on to Kim, who I went bug catching with. We managed to catch a couple of butterflies, but didn't have much luck on the bug hunt. I decided then that the best way to make friends was karaoke, so I invited Lee to go singing with me. The first song I tried was so hard, but I did well enough to raise my friendship with Lee, and he gave me a wall wreath as a present. After that, it was time for another quick shift at the bathhouse, and then I rounded out my day by going fishing with Clarence. On my 14th day, there was still no sign of the ingredients I needed for Julian's recipe in the shop. But I did encounter the text box spirit again. This time they'd left a pile of noodles in their wake. Unsure of what else I could do, I spent another day working hard at the bathhouse to raise some more money. As it was leaving, I spotted a spicy looking pepper just to the right of the doorway, which I knew I needed for Julian's recipe. This inspired me to explore a little more, and I also found some cherry blossom on the floor beneath the big blossoming tree. I stopped by the store on the way home, which was when Amelia told me about how someone had been stealing veggies from their garden in the middle of the night. I hadn't heard anything about this yet, so I checked my notice board to find 2 new quests. One from Lee, who was having trouble with someone ruining his paintings, and another from Miko, who, as we already knew, was having items stolen from her garden. I decided to head to Lee to get the gossip, but I guess he didn't want to talk about it. I love that he's become so much more friendly towards me now that we've reached another heart in our relationship though, so I decided to go singing with him to raise it even more. After another dreadfully difficult song, Lee bid farewell and it was time for me to go too, as I was once again exhausted. I headed home for a nap until 2 a.m. and then snuck out into the night to find our carrot thief. While I was investigating the veggie fields, I accidentally came across a glowing spot and dug it up to reveal a spirit tome. I stayed up till 3:30 looking for the thieving spirit, but wasn't able to find them and had to abandon my stakeout due to exhaustion. There was still no sign of the ingredients I needed the next day, so I decided to splurge some of my money on an upgrade for the bathhouse. I unlocked a private bath on the left, which would thankfully only take until the next day to upgrade now that I was doing it in a working week. With the bathhouse now closed for maintenance, I set out on my quest to raise my friendship levels again. I started by chatting to Quill, which is when I got another interesting development in the story of our mysterious carrot thief. Quill had found a strange small door in his house that he couldn't open. Miko said that it had always been there, but Quill wasn't so sure. After that, I went fishing with Sujin. It was during this fishing session that I encountered seaweed for the first time in the fishing minigame. This made the game a lot more difficult as the vines would tangle around my hook and I needed to break them before I could resume catching the fish. I really liked this mechanic as it added a little bit more thought and excitement to the minigame. This was also when I reached another friendship level with Sujin. She gifted me a Christmas tree for my house and I headed home to put it up straight away in my entrance hallway. I also put up the little model of lady that she'd given me as well. While decorating, I interacted with my desk for the first time, which prompted me to work on my book. At this point, I'd completely forgotten that I was meant to be writing a story, so I decided to settle down and document all of the spirits I'd encountered so far. There were a few, and time passed to the point where it was now 2 a.m, the perfect time to go spirit hunting. So I took a seat on the chess table and waited and waited and waited. I stayed out until 5 a.m, but couldn't find the culprit. And even after checking Quill and Miko's house, I couldn't find the mysterious door either. My quest to befriend Sujin continued the next day with a 4-hour fishathon that resulted in us reaching max friendship. I explained to her about the spirits and the bathhouse, and she was really excited to get involved and see what we were getting up to. I then went to visit Miko, who chatted to me a bit about her carrot thief, but I still didn't get any more information than I already had, and I still couldn't find the mysterious door in the house. Determined that tonight would be the night I caught the thief, I headed to bed early and woke up at 3 a.m. on a mission. At around 4 a.m, I left the fields to make my way to Miko's house to see if I could find the small door, which is when I saw the spirit scurrying down the pavement. I ran to confront it, but only succeeded in scaring it away, and sadly there was nothing else I could do that night, so it was back to bed. After a few days off while I waited for my upgrade, I made my way back to the bathhouse the next day to earn some more moulags. This was also my first day with Sujin helping me out, so I set her to work on brushing all the spirits to keep their morale up. Together we worked hard for about 6 hours until my exhaustion from staying up late every night caught up with me. The next day continued the same as every other day that week. I went to the shop to look for ingredients, but couldn't find what I needed. I chatted to some of the townsfolk and I opened the bathhouse. The day passed quickly, and at 3 p.m. I headed to bed to get some sleep before another night of exploring. This time I went directly to Miko's house now that I knew this was where the spirit started each night, and for the first time I saw the purple door. I'm not sure why I couldn't see it on the previous nights, perhaps I'd finally leveled up enough in spirituality. But either way I could see it and the stakeout could resume. We took up a position by the bathroom and kept a watch on the door until the spirit snuck out at around 4 a.m. However, as I went to confront it, it once again dashed away. Wonyan suggested that perhaps we could use its love of carrots as a trap, and this reminded me of the carrot cake recipe I'd bought earlier that week. At this point, I'd thankfully started buying every recipe so as not to miss one like Julian's again. I woke up at 2 p.m. the next day on a mission to bake a cake and catch a spirit. First, I needed to collect the ingredients to make a cake, and then the carrot cake, which fortunately I'd already purchased most of already. The few pieces that I was missing were all readily available at the convenience store, which was a good thing because Song was refusing to be helpful today. After baking my cake, I also made my carrot cake, and then passed my time doing some fishing before realizing I should probably head to bed so as not to be exhausted for my nighttime adventure. At 3 a.m. it was time to head to Miko's house, and I dropped the carrot at the bottom of the stairs before taking up a position in the corner of the room to wait. Once again, at 4 a.m. on the dot, the spirit emerged and immediately began demolishing the tasty carrot cake, which is when Wonyan clanged it over the head with his coin. The spirit immediately started crying, accusing Wonyan of hitting a lady, and soon remembered who they were. They promised to leave their thieving days behind them and come visit us at the bathhouse. And just like that, another spirit quest was wrapped up. Although I am surprised that Miko and Quill didn't wake up with all the racket we were making. The next day was Saturday, which was perfect as it meant Lee would be painting outside of his van. I set out to chat to him and he explained that there was a black speck marring his canvas. I couldn't see any spirit around him, nor when I looked at his canvas either. But when I spoke to him again, I was surprised by upgrading our friendship level, and he gifted me a painting he'd made of my house. After that, I went fishing with Clarence for a bit before meeting Lee again to take him singing with me. Once again, I did dreadfully at the minigame, but not bad enough because we reached max friendship. And I soon explained to Lee about the spirits and the bathhouse. It turns out that he'd already suspected something and he was excited to get involved as well. On my way to the shop, I encountered another case of the noodle text box, but I was still no closer to solving this mystery. But when I did make it to the shop, they finally had the recipe I needed to make Julian's family recipe. I ran straight home to whip up Julian's family recipe. Then it was time to head to the restaurant. The spirit was impressed that we'd tried to create the recipe ourselves, and while it wasn't perfect, it was good enough to remind them of who they were. A cute little creature pulling a sushi cart. The spirit designs in this game are honestly fantastic. With only the painting spirit and the noodle spirit left, I wasn't really sure what to do with myself the next day. I started the day by going to the shop and ended up spending all my money on a bug trap because I was getting fed up with being unable to catch all the bugs that were running around. Then I went to the bathhouse and started another shift, this time with Lee there to help out alongside Sujin. I set him to work on washing and drying all the towels, so I just needed to ferry them back and forth. And I actually found myself having a lot more free time in the bathhouse this time. I can't help but wonder what will happen in the future as we had more people to help out. At least we had a lot of joyful spirits, so we were earning a lot of moolags. Just after leaving the bathhouse for the day, I bumped into Ling and asked if she wanted to hang out, and she did. We popped in to see Quill, who was pleased to report that the little door had disappeared, and then it was onward to karaoke. I was finally able to get another S-rank song and increased my friendship with Yumi as well, who gave me a ramen sign for my house. Which was fitting as on the way home to put it up, we encountered the noodle spirit again. But this time they showed their face. Apparently we'd scared them and they'd spilled their noodles everywhere, so they asked us to get some more noodles for them. Unfortunately, the convenience store was shut, so I couldn't pick them up for the spirit tonight. The first thing I did the next morning was hang up my new neon noodle sign, and then I headed to the convenience store for some ramen. The only noodles Kenzo had were some spicy red ones rather than the yellow ones the spirit asked for, but I'm sure that would be fine, right? I also visited Amelia at the general store for some beef for a recipe for one of the shrines, and then once again I was out of moulags, so it was back to the bathhouse to make some more. Today I put Lee on running the towels instead of washing them, and this was definitely a bad idea. He only carried a few at a time, and it felt like I always ended up ferrying them myself because he walked so slowly. After a good few hours of work, I made my way home and stopped to speak to Gillian, who mentioned that Sora must party a lot on a Saturday night because he always looks so tired on a Sunday morning. With that new hint in mind, I visited the notice board to discover a new quest from Sora, who was apparently having trouble sleeping. Sadly, this only seemed to happen on a Saturday night, and it was Monday today, so I had a long wait ahead of me to solve that spirit. I spent the next day just working at the bathhouse again, but on day 24 it was Wednesday, which meant Lee was going to be painting. I headed to meet him again straight away, and once again his painting was ruined by a strange moving black dot. This time when I investigated the painting, I saw the spirit standing at the edge of the canvas. Freaky! Sadly, I couldn't seem to interact with it, so this would need to be solved another time. On my way back to town though, the noodle spirit reappeared and I gifted them my spicy noodles. They said it was a little hot, which reminded them of who they were before. A creepy boned creature that looked straight out of the Witcher series. It was definitely one of the darker creatures we'd met so far, and according to Wanyan, this probably wasn't going to be the last we'd deal with them. After that, it was time to go fishing again, this time with Song and baby Momo. We were so close to increasing our friendship when she had to go and open the shop. On the one hand, I was sad as I wanted to improve our friendship, but on the other hand, I needed the shop open to buy something for a recipe. With kimchi in hand, I went home and boiled up some spicy kimchi stew. While I waited, I added a few more decorations to my house, which was starting to look very Christmassy considering it was spring. Except it turns out I'd made a mistake and used beef instead of pork, so my stew failed. Distraught, I made my way back to the store to rebuy the ingredients, only to discover they didn't have everything I needed. I decided to make my way to Faye's house next and spent some money on clearing the overgrown cooking area in the bathhouse, so that we could start cooking meals there and feeding our spirits. Then, to cure my sadness, I went to the karaoke place with Gillian to try and raise my friendship with her, before she left for the summer. We almost made it all the way to Max, and she kindly gifted me a bard figurine and a copy of the magazine she writes for, before leaving to go somewhere. I finished off the day by doing some fishing with Quill, and then trying out the drink challenge again with Lee. I once again sank the Titanic though, although I'm still not sure how it works. We're entering our last 5 days of the video now, and the first thing I did was chat to Tifa, which revealed a new quirk to the game. Our noodle spirit Anishi had made a mess in our chat boxes. If we wanted to fix them, we'd have to find a special elixir that was usually used to clean up the bathhouse. Wanyan said that the recipe had been buried with the old keeper in the graveyard. I headed to the graveyard next and soon found a magical digging spot, except I'd somehow lost my shovel. So I had to dash back to the shop to buy it before heading back to the digging spot again. Thankfully, I was able to grab the recipe, but then came the next issue. I needed to access the recipe book in the bathhouse, except I'd only paid for that to unlock the day before, and Faye was now hard at work constructing it. So I decided to take a look at some of the other mystery maps I'd collected, to see if I could work out where some digging spots were. I could not. But I did manage to finally cook spicy kimchi stew, and I wrote a bit more of my book while it was cooking. Then I went straight to the shrine to drop it off. I still need a dragonfish and a yellow jacket for this shrine, but I've not encountered either of them yet, so I'm guessing they're maybe not available in spring. The bathhouse had reopened the next day, so I went there to check out the ingredients I needed for the elixir. Then while I was exploring, I encountered the lemon I'd been searching for the mountain shrine. With nothing else to do spirit-wise, I made the decision to go to the bathhouse to earn some extra moulags. The next day was Saturday, which meant Lee was painting again. Strangely, when I spoke to him today, he said his painting was completely back to normal, but I hadn't done anything. Then bam! We both got a shock. I opened my spirit tea and managed to catch the sneaky spirit getting up to mischief behind his canvas. This spirit was so cute when it remembered who it was. A little bird with a giant paintbrush. With that spirit dealt with, I collected all the ingredients I needed and ran to the bathhouse to make the elixir. Before long, the elixir had fermented and I was able to clean up our text boxes. And I also had 2 left over as well, which I suspected I'd need for the murky bathwater that the spirit kept leaving behind. Since I was at the bathhouse, I decided to open it for a few hours, and then I spent the evening waiting for Sora to head to bed, so I could work out what was going on with his sleepwalking. I maybe made a mistake though, as I didn't think to take a nap, so even before anything had happened, I was exhausted and needed to go home and sleep. When I woke up 2 hours later, I sprinted to Sora's house, only to see he was now at the mountain top, so I made my way up there. Except, it wasn't Sora that greeted me. Instead, there was a masked figure running a mysterious shop out of the ruined hut. I purchased everything they had in stock just in case the shop disappeared after I worked out whatever was going on with Sora. But then I was exhausted again before the mysterious figure headed home, so I had to quickly run home for another nap. This time, when I emerged, the masked figure was on the move. I followed them back to Sora's bedroom and I watched as they transformed back into Sora, but I couldn't interact with them at all. Sadly, that meant I'd need to wait another week before I could work out what was going on with Sora. After 6 hours of sleep, I woke up in the afternoon of day 28 and squeezed in an evening of work at the bathhouse before heading back to bed. The next day was the first day of summer, so I caught up with my friend Song to do some fishing and see the new summer fish. Then I made my way to the mountain shrine to donate my lemon, which left the rainbow worm and the lunchbox. On my way back down, I bumped into Sora, who mentioned a new person I'd never heard of before, Yari. It turns out that when Jillian left after spring, Yari took her place at the pension, which is a fun little touch. And it turns out that he's having an issue with some crows around town. I decided to go and meet him and find out what was going on. While walking around town, he was chased by the crows, and they just picked him up and carried him away. Of course, I had to go and investigate, and I quickly discovered that Yari had been telling the truth when I was scooped up by 3 crows and deposited at the top of the mountain. I was out cold for a few hours, but during that time, Wanyan had been hard at work. He'd found one crow in particular that was acting weirder than the others. While up there, I nipped into the bathhouse to try and plant 2 seeds I'd received off the squirrels to see if I could get them to grow. Then I headed off to find some crows. But it was too dark and it wasn't really possible to discern a difference between all the crows, even with my spirit vision. So I gave up and headed to bed, ready to try again the next day. On day 30, I immediately started my crow hunt again, but I was surprised to discover a spirit making crow noises rather than an actual crow. The crow spirit wasn't very happy, but neither was Wanyan, who once again took to beating up the spirit to make them see sense. This spirit looked so cool. The giant bird with a house on its back looked amazing, and it made me really excited to see what new spirits there were still left to discover in this game. It seemed only fitting to finish off my final day of this video by visiting the bathhouse once more. As I finished up my day, I chatted to Sora, who explained about the hot springs being blocked off. Until now, I'd assumed that it would be unlocked as part of the story, similar to the mines in Stardew Valley. But when I went to explore, I discovered that I needed to donate wood from the bathhouse. I was really sad that I hadn't realised this earlier, but I immediately went back to the bathhouse to collect all the wood I could that day. Sadly, that means I couldn't include the hot springs in this video, but it gives me, and you, something exciting to look forward to in the future. And this is the end of my 30 days of Spirittea. As you can see from this little overview pamphlet, there are still so many more spirits to meet, which means more detective work to do as well. So far, I'm really enjoying Spirittea and how creative it is. It's so fun unlocking the spirits and seeing their new designs, and I also really enjoy the quests you need to go on to discover them. I do have a few things I would love to see in the future, like being able to decorate the bathhouse would be really cool. I would also like to be able to quickly equip the tools rather than needing to open my backpack first, especially for the little bugs that appear and disappear quickly. Speaking of that, I found bug catching really hard and would love to know what I'm doing wrong. I would also love to be able to distinguish between treasure maps I've completed and ones I haven't, as at the point they're all clumped together and I don't know which ones I've already done. But other than that, I am really enjoying Spirittea and I'm definitely going to keep going to discover all the spirits. What about you? Are you going to be picking up Spirittea? Let me know in the comments, and if you've enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!